Whoa, Dad, go, Dad.
That's right. Welcome to Whoa Dad, Go Dad. My name's Dave Momper. I'm your host. This is a fatherhood podcast for new dads and soon-to-be dads. I'm a new dad myself, and I'm asking every day, great dads, what does it take? What does it truly take to take on the ultimate role? All right, let's get to it. Mr. Shane Stowell, welcome to Whoa Dad, Go Dad.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's nice to be here.
How are we doing today?
You know what? I can't complain. The sun's shining and I live in a beautiful place and life's good.
Beautiful. Fantastic. I love to hear that. And you're a Utah, your Utah vantage right now is, so it used to be Denver. It used to be Dallas. I'm trying to
Yeah.
remember all the places you've lived since I've known you.
Yeah, probably since I've known you, it was probably Utah, Dallas, Denver. We were in Southern California for, a decade before that. But yeah, since I've known you, that's probably the places we've been.
You know, to have you on, Shane, the podcast is, for me, it's this beautiful, you don't realize, and I'm in my early mid 40s, but you don't realize how much truly relationships are not the only thing that matters, but what really matters, and how like a decade ago, plus 11 years ago, I encounter you because I was enrolled in the Downtown Denver Partnership Leadership Development Program as a participant, and you were our shepherd.
Well,
And I remember, you're in the front of the room. There's probably 90 of us. I'm thinking of all the great connections I have as a result of that program. And I remember going, at that time, I was yearning to be in a capacity to facilitate leadership conversations and to coach and mentor and inspire people. And there's this guy doing it, right? How old were you then, by the way?
So 11 years ago, I'd have been probably about like early 40s, late 30s, early 40s.
Cool.
Close
Yeah,
to
right on.
right now, probably.
I just remember, and eventually I leaned on you, and I'm like, Shane, somehow one day I want to do this kind of work. Can I get some feedback? And you were gracious with your time, and we've been connected ever since, and talked a little bit here and there over the years, and uh, reconnected partly due to this fatherhood podcast. So it's good to be with you.
Well, thanks. It's good to be with you too. And it's been fun to watch your career go in the directions that you articulated you wanted it to over a decade ago.
Yeah, that's funny. Truly, I mean, I wonder what exactly I said, but I had my intentions set. It was cumbersome in the moment. I remember feeling over the years early on, like, I'm not making the progress, or I'm not where I want to be, or, it doesn't even feel like the lack of clarity I had, um, but persevered and sorted it out, and here we go. So Shane, for the listeners out there, you're bringing a wealth of knowledge to this conversation, and I have the good fortune of a lot of great connections, and I've brought them to the stage and asked them some things, and some of them are younger dads like me. Some of them are I've interviewed a few folks with kids in their 30s, I suppose. But what I really am eager to hear about is partly you're a recent empty nester. So there's like, what's that like? Meaning you have, I guess they'd be 17 or 18-year-old twins, and then a 20-year-old son. They're all on the cusp or in the midst of taking on young adulthood on their own in some independence, which is, I got to ask you a million questions about that. And so you've got this great, you know, cusp of chapters as a parent that I want to explore. Plus, you have a doctorate in clinical psychology. And I just wonder, the average parent out there is absolutely winging it, and yet you might have a little bit more insight into how this, the mind and body work, and how parents can bring the most out of their kiddos, I suppose, as a clinician, right? So I'm curious about that. And you're in this realm similar to my realm, helping humans sees their potential inside of organizations with leadership development, and you don't have your own consulting firm. You've worked with a couple organizations. I met you at, I think you were at RHR International at the time. Um, you were a chief people officer for a company at one point. You know, you've served in this interesting capacity that ties to leadership. You're a parent. I can't wait to tap into it. And now here's the question. Did I see that you started a tanning company? You're so you're an entrepreneur, and was your first endeavor a tanning salon? Is that right?
Uh, yeah, yes, it was my second endeavor. My first endeavor was in college. And I came across a fireworks distributor that would we set up a fireworks business over the summers for 4th of July, and that turned out to be a pretty good decision and kind of paid for college.
Hmm.
And I worked, a couple months during the summer and did that, and I kind of got the bug of I kind of like this entrepreneurial stuff. The second was with me and my wife. While she was finishing college, we had the opportunity to we partnered with my sister. She started a hair salon, and we kind of on a whim put 3 tanning beds inside of that hair salon, and became pretty clear in the first month in a university town, where winter is prevalent for most of the year, that was a good decision. And so we bought the space next to us and opened up a larger just tanning bed enterprise, and it kind of grew. And we ran it remotely while we were at graduate school in Southern California, and kind of turned it into a bigger business than we ever anticipated, and then sold it off, when I graduated from grad school in 2008.
Amazing. I remember back when I thought I needed to go to Tanning Boost as a high schooler. It was like all my friends were doing. I'm like, I have to go get a tan now? What? What do what? I don't understand. Can't we just be outside? But
Yeah,
no, that was all the rage. Is it still, would you say, is that still a thriving business, or have I
I
feel
think
like
it's
we've
shifted. I think it
adjusted.
shifted more to like spray tans
Hmm.
and that sort of stuff. But it's still there, and it's. I mean, the business that we started. It's my wife and I moved back to our hometown a couple years ago during COVID, and both of those businesses we started, 23 years ago, are still open and running and thriving. So
Amazing.
I feel like we got something right. Um,
Yeah, amazing. Ripple effects. So you
yeah.
planted some seeds, eventually you harvested them, but they kept growing, and that's in the business realm. It's kind of the same growing 2, 3 capable human beings. So tell us, I know your perspective on fatherhood now is so I'm intrigued by it because of your transitions, and also because as a brand new dad, I'm like, I know one day my kid is going to leave the house. Like, what do I need to do to get him set for that? What do I need to do? What skills must he have? Um, what does that take of me? And I don't feel overwhelmed by it, but I'm curious about it, and that's kind of what this whole podcast is about, exploring those things. But what was the experience leading up for you and your wife, leading up to maybe the last 6 months where you already had your son who was off to college, now you got your 2 daughters off to college, and
Yeah, it's a good question, Dave. And I wish I had like, hey, here's the prescribed answer, and here's what everybody should do, and here's what it looks like. And you know, we joke a little bit in our family around we didn't put together kind of investment strategies for our kids to go to college. We didn't, invest in their college education. We invested in them learning how to learn,
mm,
and teaching them from an early age that learning is important, and making mistakes and exploring the world and being curious, and using their imagination would lead to them being able to, have their own kind of accomplishments take care of college, which came to fruition. But we joke in our family that what we were doing was putting money aside for a future therapy fund, because
mm,
my wife and I both have backgrounds in psychology, and psychologist kids are usually the ones that are the most disturbed. The old the cobbler's kids don't have shoes kind of moment.
right, right.
That's the joke in our family, is how bad did we mess you up? But I I think it's been kind of a sombering moment over the last couple of years as our son's gone off and as our twins now are leaving to reflect back on what did we do and how much of that was us just kind of trying to have a vision of we just want to create good human beings and we want them to understand how to be powerful contributors inside of whatever community they choose to be a part of, wherever that may be. How do you leave the world better than you found it? And how do you start to figure out what you need, what you want, and also realize that it's about other people along the way as well. And then try to create the conditions to let that unfold. And when it doesn't, or when you mess it up, to be willing to say, you know what, I was wrong. I screwed up. I think one of the most important things for me is to realize and recognize when I show up poorly for my kids, to model to them that that's okay, as long as you recognize it and as long as you come back and you apologize and you say, I want to try to do better. And I think those are skills that we're seeing our kids demonstrate as they jump out on their own. And they're not going to get it right all the time, but at least they'll be aware, hopefully, and they'll be willing to kind of put themselves out there in ways that when they get it wrong, they'll acknowledge it and try to do better.
Oh yeah, and appreciate the iterative nature of life. It's
Yeah.
just it's a giant experiment in a sense. But
Yeah.
okay, I'm with you on all that. But I'm like, what were you feeling 6 months before a month ago? What were
Yeah.
you and your wife? What was the conversation like? And what were you feeling about becoming empty nesters and sending your kid out? You know, you've done what you can do. You're still there, don't get me wrong, but it's now like, all right, let's see what happens. But what were you feeling and what was the conversation like?
Yeah. So a whole host of emotions, from sheer terror, like how bad did we really mess this up? Are they going to be able to figure out how to call and make their own doctor's appointments and go grocery shopping at the same time? Right. Do they understand what it takes to be successful, and are they willing to continue to forge that? So sheer terror around, did we do enough? And then these moments of like pure joy when we stop and go, we're so proud of who they are and what they're doing and where they're going. And you have a child and you're in those early years and you feel all of that too. But to see and realize that here we are 20 years later and we're feeling the same things, but in many ways it's at a different intensity in different places. So, I remember the first night we came home with our twins, and they were premature. They'd been in the NICU for a month and had significant health problems. And I woke up in the middle of the night. It was the first week we had them. And I woke up like sweating and like panicked. And my wife looked at me and she's like, what is wrong? I'm like, I had the worst nightmare ever. She said, well, what was it? And I said, I just realized, what are we going to do when they're 16, 17, and 18, and they both like the same boy, and the boy likes one of them, but not the other one? What do we do in that moment? And she goes, yeah, that is terrifying. I don't know, but let's worry about that 16 years from now. And I think you feel all of those feelings, and then there's this sheer joy of look at what we've created. Look at the opportunity to raise something and the precious gift that is, and how much just sitting there and watching them do nothing can bring just these moments of peace and euphoria to you. And now watching that later, when they're at this moment in their life where they're having this excitement about what the future holds for them, thinking about what their own dreams, wishes, and motivations are for the future, and being able to sit there and watch that, and not being able to do anything or change it, but being able to sit there and watch that kind of joy and be a part of that is just, it's awe-inspiring in many ways. And to realize that I thought it was going to go away. And at every phase of their childhood, every phase of our existence with them as their parents has created those moments where it's all there. All of those emotions are there. And we shed a lot of tears. My wife and I are both, we're very involved in our kids' lives, not in trying to control or dictate, but because we want to be there and witness it, and be there for them and help them learn from it should they need it, but to also watch and be a part of seeing them thrive through their successes, and to realize that that piece is gone in some way, shape, or form, and that they might not need you in the way that they needed you before. And how do you make that transition to where, yeah, you are an adult, you can make those decisions in new and different ways, and you can seek our advice, but we're not necessarily going to throw it out there unless you seek it. Um, and the difficulty of making that adjustment and that transition for us has been a one of great learning as well. And I feel like it's almost, I find myself stumbling over it and not getting it right. So it might even be harder right now than it was when they were younger in some ways.
Well, and you're in the cusp. This is the cusp versus you're not on the other side of this new operating style where it's like an active parenting versus passive parenting. This chapter is now, of course, you're never going to not be their parent and their father and be there to support them and root them on and all that. But yeah, you might not be at every game or they're not coming home with their graded paper or their project. They might call you.
They might.
They might just go tie one on at the bar. I don't know. Interesting. So some confronting. Now, I mean, I adore you, so I'm not doubting this, but I mean, do you feel like you did it? You equipped them? You've set the three of them up for success, or is there like, gosh, is that one thing that I just wish they had a little bit more of?
Yeah, I don't know that it's the one thing. I think it's no matter what it is, there's another thing that you kind of go, oh, we never did that. I never went deep enough into that piece, or I showed them that once, but do they remember it?
Hmm.
Are they going to be able to figure it? And then I go back to what my wife and I set out to do when we first had children. And that is, can we teach them to think for themselves and to learn and to figure things out? Because if they have that skill, they'll be able to do anything they want in their lives.
Hmm.
And if we can tether that to, it's not always just about you, but it's about how you help others along the way, those two things together can create pretty amazing effects. And so we're hopeful that they've got enough to be able to go figure it out. And also, we don't want it to go perfect. We want them to experience life in its fullness so that they can have moments similar to what my son created for me and him standing at the store, right? Where he realizes one of the saddest moments of my life and one of the most challenging things I've ever had to face in terms of a chronic illness is probably one of the most powerful things that is helping me see life in a new and different way. Um, those are moments you can't anticipate. They're moments you can't create. You just have to hope that they will take the opportunity and see it in that light when they confront it.
Well, and I want to come back to that the anecdotes and wisdom inside that story about your son is incredible. Um, and I wonder if it's something like that that feels like, okay, that's the validation. They've got this. They're good. He's good. I'm sure your daughters are showing you other signs of validation and maybe worry. Who knows? But it's like they're going to be okay. I think he's got this. He's got this. I suspect. Is that fair to say? That was kind of this validation
It was a moment,
moment.
or it was kind
Mm.
of all right. Like he sees it, and let him soar. And now it's time for you to learn from him. And
Whoa.
it's probably the same. It's probably the same way with my twins at this point. I will say this is Whoa Dad, Go Dad, right? We talked about the power of fatherhood, and we'll probably get into this. That I think fatherhood has been underrated in our society over the last several decades and maybe longer. But I would also say I feel the same way about motherhood. I
Mm.
think parenting and doing it well together is incredibly powerful. And I think it's a key component of what leads to successful, well-adjusted adults. And
So you,
it's hard. And that can come in a lot of ways, but having someone that is there for you, that you know cares about you. And I know there's been things that my son goes to my wife for that I don't get and understand, and vice versa. And the same with my daughters. And I think they get different pieces of what they need to find success in their lives in different ways, each of us. And that's not an indictment on one or either of us not being able to give that to them. I think it's the power of the kind of roles that parents play in understanding that we're both important and we both add value in incredible ways. And don't underestimate that. Don't feel guilty about it. Don't shame it. Embrace it and let everybody add the value they can.
well, and how ridiculous of us as young parents to think that as an individual we're supposed to be everything and know everything for our kiddos, but no, it's actually the variety that my partner and I bring, my wife and I bring, that will serve my kiddo, and the variety that you and your wife, it's just like you're creating a more comprehensive and prudent repository of possibilities for your kiddos.
Yeah. I
So,
love the
but
way you
before,
frame that
before
around it. It's a diversity of experience where in
yeah,
whatever way, shape, or form that comes.
you
I,
mentioned your wife and you had like a question that guided you. Was that just off the cuff, or did you early on agree with your wife to say like, what's the ultimate question that will serve us in getting in well, it'll serve us in serving our kiddos. And you said, can we teach them to think for themselves? Can we teach them? So did you narrow it down to that? And was that an agreed explicit statement, or is that in hindsight?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think we kind of happened into a place where education has been very important to us both in our lives. It's been an incredible factor in both of us finding success in our lives and also being able to learn and do and try new things because you don't always have somebody that knows. And so if you're interested in something, how can you figure it out? You can learn, you can explore, and you can figure out how to learn that. There's lots of ways to do that, from finding the right people to help teach you to getting good at learning and reading and exploring and being inquisitive on your own. We had a lot of conversations early in our dating life and in our early marriage that were about what do we want if we have kids. Is what's the point? What do we want? Why would we want to have children, and what would we want to come of that? And I think there was, 1,000 things that we talked about and landed on. But as our kids started to grow and we started to watch them explore and we started to get to know them, and we realized the powers of inquisitiveness and the power of thinking about the future, it became pretty clear to us that that was a really important one, helping them learn how to learn. And it became a place to create incredible moments for us where it wasn't just we're spending time together, but we're spending time together and we're both growing and learning and expanding our horizons. They're learning from us, we're learning from them, we're doing something new, which creates incredible, meaningful time together. Um, and then the opportunity to unpack that and them to see you do something that you're not great at, and they see that you're vulnerable and you're willing to say, hey, I'm doing this because there's another purpose beyond just being the best. And so we landed in that place that it was something that was meaningful to us. Now there's probably 1,000 others, and my wife, if she was here, would probably be like, no, that's not the one, Shane. It was this one, and she'd probably be right too. But I think it was one that, as we've come back to and we've looked at, the power of teaching them to think and explore their world and be okay with that became really important to us.
Right on. Yeah, I love that. Like, what is the essence of the role? I've called the essence of this podcast exploring what it takes to take on the ultimate role. So I think of parenting And being that I'm a father, I'm thinking of fatherhood as my ultimate role. Like, what does it take to take on the ultimate role? What's the essence of that role? Well, one way of acknowledging the essence of the role is to say, my ultimate duty is to help them learn how to learn.
Hmm.
So what are, I mean, just, riddle with me on this. What would your wife potentially say? What are other essential things that the role demands out of us that is the essence of the role?
Yeah. Really good question. I think it's a willingness to put someone else first
Well,
and
yeah.
kind of put your own needs on the back burner, even at times when you feel like I don't have time, I don't have energy. I think it's in those moments that it creates the most impact because at some point in time, you have those moments where they go, "Do you remember that? Do you remember when you did that?" And sometimes you remember it, sometimes you don't, and you don't realize the impact it had. But then they go, I know that you just got home from a late night flight and that you were really tired or I saw you leave early so that you could take off early to get to this dance event or this concert or this sporting event or to be there to celebrate with me or to take me where I needed to be because it was important to me. I mean, there were many years of our married life where my wife was shuttling kids around all afternoon and putting what she wanted in her dreams beyond just kids on the back burner.
Mhm.
Um, and I think we both made those kinds of sacrifices at different points in time. Um, and that's hard, but I think that's an important imperative of the role. Are
Yeah.
you willing to put your needs in second place sometimes? Are you willing to sacrifice?
Yeah. And then somehow simultaneously don't neglect yourself.
Yeah. Yeah,
How
I mean, that's so important to find those moments I can't do it forever and I can't go forever. So
yeah.
how do I recharge? And what are those things that do recharge you? And what I started to discover and find, and this maybe comes back to your question around what's it like as you're in the cusp of this and what do you feel? I found in those moments that I started to really recharge around those things that I did with my kids and that I did with my wife. That they weren't things that when it was just me, I didn't know I would recharge in that way.
Mm,
But being there in those moments where they realize and recognize that they can be good at something or that they enjoy something or that they're finding joy in ways that they didn't anticipate it really charged my batteries.
mm.
um, and and it's one of the things that I'm a little bit worried about as I head into this new piece, and it causes me some sadness is am I going to be able to find that in that same way? Because 15, 20 years ago, I didn't know that it would be that powerful for me. And now I do. And I'm worried about how I'm going to find that the same way if they're not here. And that maybe that's codependent. I don't know. Maybe that's unhealthy. I don't know, but it surprised me. And I've got to figure out how to, find a joy and recharge in new ways and reconnect with other things that did recharge me at one point in time.
Interesting. I love that thought that being fully present with our kiddos, although it feels like we're sacrificing our things, it actually could potentially fire up the energy on behalf of those things. It's like it actually builds on each other. Although if you were to be fulfilling the responsibility of being present, physically present, but you weren't emotionally or mentally present, that's actually taxing and reducing your ability to go crush it over here or be focused over here. So yeah, that the discipline to be all in on the moments and let believe the sentiment that's actually charging your batteries so you can go perform at a high level over here when you're back in this mode, work mode or performance mode. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And it's something I didn't anticipate. I didn't prepare for. I didn't think about. It just started to be.
Yeah,
It, and maybe that's, an indication of what I needed in order to find myself a little bit in different ways as well.
yeah. So Shane, just to give context, I have a couple questions I'm tempted to go to, but I almost want you to share first and foremost the function you're serving for some of your clients to give context of how you see leadership at large as a function of, say, organizational success and people success. And then, there's so many correlations, dotted lines, and aspects of being a parent and being a great leader that I'm like, we're just going to play with that. But what does your role look like? What are your clients struggling with or faced with or seeking? And how are you supporting, the modern leader landscape?
Most of the work that I do is with C-suite leadership and their teams, from helping select new team members to helping integrate new team members to helping the team find a way to coalesce and bring a diverse a collective set of perspectives and experiences together in ways that allow everybody to thrive, but also to unite and build something better across the board. So it can go from working with people that have had a difficult time or for whatever reason are struggling to new leaders who have never been in role before and are trying to figure it out and understand what that looks like, and how do you help them realize that that's part of the journey and it's okay and you don't have to have all the answers, and then how do you help people come together and coalesce as a group when you've got a bunch of different high performers with different perspectives, bringing a lot to the table and they all want to succeed. How do you help unify that so everybody's rolling in the same direction? And it's fun, it's fascinating, it's different, it's challenging, it's all that stuff rolled up into one. And it probably tugs at all those emotions you feel as a parent almost every day as you're watching that unfold in your own kids.
Nice. I think it's also timeless. Like it's a timeless need to help teams thrive together, to have a coach, a facilitator, someone, a third party to help just hold up the mirror or to reveal a new tool or, and human beings struggling to work together and dysfunction feels timeless. And the need and the desire to coalesce in the face of that feels timeless too. So I love the industry we're in, and I love that that I love being in the industry you've been in forever after setting my vision up years and almost a decade ago. So I would love your take, your philosophy, your perspective on what's the difference as an adult leading adults from an adult leading children, their kids. What are the distinctions, and then eventually, what are the similarities? What's the difference? What's the similarities?
A really good question, Dave. I don't know. I've given that a whole lot of thought. So
Yeah, chew on it.
I'm gonna wing on it for a little bit. I I think with kids, it's pretty clear that there's this blank slate, so to speak. They come with their own. They come with their own set of this is who I am. But the experiences that they're going to have in many ways are a function of you putting those experiences in front of them from the get-go. They don't have a whole lot of choice about that until certain points in life.
Mm.
So how do you think about broadening those experiences, and how do you think about starting to learn and understand from them what they need as they're pressure testing that? And how do you make decisions about when, just because they don't like it or they don't want it, it's still important for them to have, because and can see down the road that it's going to be important. I think that's a unique spot to be in as a parent. I don't think we have it in marital relationships, because people are grown adults by that point in time, or or spousal relationships or partner relationships or work relationships. I don't think it exists in that way. I think it's very unique to the parent-child relationship, and realizing and recognizing that there's a great deal of responsibility in that, but there's also a great deal of flexibility in that. If you can figure out how to pay attention to it. And I think it creates opportunities to pivot. It creates moments for you to learn and for them to learn and to adjust and do something different. And every child is a little bit different. We see that specifically with twins. Everyone, you think twins are the same, and they have their own personality, they have their own likes. And it became pretty clear early on. We did the twin thing with our daughters. We wanted to have some fun with that, and we'd dress them alike. And then it became very clear that they wanted that sometimes, and sometimes they didn't. They wanted their own personalities. They wanted their own friends. They had their own likes. They had their own dreams to explore. And so how do you, in those moments, realize and recognize that what you do with one child and what you do with another child, you have to adjust. You have to be the one that's willing to see it and change, instead of always expecting that they're going to change to conform to what you want. And I think there's real power in that. I think there's similarities in helping teams and organizations understand how and when to pivot, and that part of that pivot has to come from their own openness, not from expecting everybody else to do something different.
Right, right. I feel like as a parent, we're teaching our kids. I'm almost trying to summarize what you said here. As a parent, our duty, our responsibility is to teach them agency and a bunch of other things like creativity and, experimentation, but agency. But when we're working with our fellow adults, we're actually managing their lack, their how much awareness they have of their agency from their childhood, or how much perhaps they didn't really claim, and that might be affecting how they're, approaching problems and opportunities in the workforce too. But there's something about agency that's a huge distinction. Like we should already have agency as adults. We definitely don't have agency as kiddos. We're we're as parents, we're revealing agency to them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And
Now that
figure that out when and how that works in their favor, and when and how it doesn't.
right, right.
Yeah.
How about like the communication, like to lead kids? Is there a massive distinction between how we actually communicate versus how we communicate with adults? Or is there some ironic similarities? Are we all just grown-up kids in a way, and we all need the same? And the reason I ask this, there's this book called How to Listen So Kids Will Speak and How to Speak So Kids Will Listen. And I read this before I had a kid because someone's like, this is for children and parents. But it turns out all of us are, as adults, are really just kids with more responsibilities. We inherently have the same needs to be heard, to be appreciated, to be challenged, and to be playful, even to to have a sense of belonging, right? But we're kind of the same. We just have more on our to-do list. So I don't know, what's your sense of adjusting our communication style, even between people, between twins, between humans, but then between the two different age groups, children and adults? Is that drastically different?
Yeah, I think it is drastically different, but I don't know if it should be. I think maybe that's part of where we lose sight of the simplicity of being able to communicate and listen to one another, to understand what each other's needs are. And you can watch kids, you can be around kids, and you can convey incredible meaning in very simple ways.
Mhm.
And they get it, they understand it, and they can convey it back and forth amongst themselves. And I think sometimes we get so hung up in this complexity that we lose sight of, let's just say what we really mean. And it's okay for us to think different. It's okay for us to be different. And it's, in fact, there's real power in that. And we can still be friends, and let's go swing on the swings. And how we figure that out, how we do that as adults, and how we do that in work settings, I think has become so cumbersome in many circumstances that it actually almost creates more frustration. And sometimes there are these moments where I think if we could just go back and say, what is it you really want me to know? And I would be willing to sit and listen and hear that and go, okay, I got it. Here's what I need you to know. And how can we both do that in a ways that make us better? Um, I think there would be a lot to learn from the way that we communicate with our kids and that kids communicate with each other
Well,
that we lose sight of, I think.
yeah, you kind of hear if you're on a team, it's like, I don't really, I'm not following. Explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, but get it down to the simplest aspects so that I can understand it. And I feel like if you're thinking about organizational development, leadership, coaching each other, managing a team, everybody's exchanging information at all times. And I mean, that's really, you're taking action, but then you're exchanging information on behalf of it or as a result of it or about the action. It's like the two things we ultimately owe each other, if we're truly committed, is clarity and comprehension. Right? Like if I'm your leader and I'm not creating clarity and comprehension, I'm not doing a very good job of leading you. If I'm even just your teammate and I'm trying to be a value add on your team and I'm not creating clarity and comprehension, I'm actually, I'm causing more angst and a poor use of resources and time and all that. It's like, so as a individual on a team, can I achieve clarity and comprehension either through how I listen or through how I speak? It's like, if we can do that quicker, more often, cool. What about doing that for our kiddos? It's like, that's not much different. Like that desired outcome for our kids and our fellow adults is clarity and comprehension. The methodology might change a bit.
Yeah.
The tone, I don't know. These are my philosophies or my theses. What's your sense of what I'm getting at with clarity and comprehension?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's I think you're spot on. I think if we could figure out how to do that and we can learn from our kids how to create that because oftentimes I think it's sometimes easier to mess it up or get it wrong and actually get clarity of comprehension and messaging because oftentimes when we go to people and even kids and we say, hey, it's this, and they go, no, that's not what I want. It creates it's easier for them to then say, well, here's what I want. It's not that, it's this. Whereas sometimes where we go to them and we say, well, what do you want? They don't know where to begin.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and so sometimes giving a prompt that is actually wrong allows them, and I find this even in the workplace, allows people to kind of go, no, that's not it. But I see that you're trying to hear me and I see that you're trying to get it. Now let's see if I can clarify. Let's see if I can help your comprehension. And I think that my kids have helped me see and learn that so often because I'll think I'm listening to them, I think I'll get it and I'll say it. And kids are pretty willing to say, no, that's dad, you got it wrong.
Uh,
That's not what I'm trying to say. This is what I'm trying to say. And then it's a moment for me to realize, I wasn't really listening. I wasn't comprehending, or I was worried about what I thought they were saying, and it was a moment to just stop and really try to connect.
hmm.
I think those moments, if we would create more of those moments to stop and connect and really try to understand and comprehend in the way and have the clarity that you're discussing, we'd all be better off. And kids can convey that so quickly to parents and vice versa if they're willing. And we're
I
all,
realize there's something coupled with clarity and comprehension for both kiddos and adults. It's like, yes, if we're truly committed to say efficiency and productivity as friends, as a family, as parents to kids, and as an organization, then clarity comprehension are key. But it's like, am I attuned to my audience and what's actually meaningful and relevant to them?
yeah,
So clarity comprehension, uh, you know, you actually have to take on their perspective, understand what's meaningful and relevant for them to create clarity and comprehension for them or to help achieve that.
yeah.
Otherwise, it's just rhetoric. Creating clarity and comprehension, good idea, but what is actually meaningful and relevant to your audience? So, what's meaningful and relevant to my kiddo? So, how am I going to package what I say or help them hear what I need them to hear? Same goes for adults.
Yeah.
Turns out.
Absolutely. And I might add on to that because I think that's really well said, Dave. I might add on, I think that that happens in ways for a parent and a child um, that we underestimate the power and importance of that. My guess is that you've been a parent long enough that when your child's crying, even if they can't articulate with clarity because they don't have words, right? Or they don't have the words yet. Um, you can know based off of their cry and based off of their actions what they're trying to convey, right? I'm hungry, I'm tired, I need a diaper change, whatever. Like there's a lot of things that we learn to understand and comprehend from our children, and vice versa. They probably pick up on from us
Mm.
that if we would take the time to see it and be that present, I think we would pick up on a whole lot of other things that are really coming through, and we would all be better off with as parents and children and as adults inside of a work setting or as adults inside of a relationship. I
Yep.
think those messages are there, but sometimes we don't pick up on them or pay attention to them because we're not attuned to it the way we are when our children are young.
I am definitely lately hearing he's not making words. He does say "bah." He's about to say something very soon, but it's more he's learning his vocal cords, right?
Yeah.
But yesterday he was verbalizing, kind of crying, definitely upset, and you're like, okay, you're hungry. You want the boob. You want mom. You're calling for. You don't want me anymore. That's
Yeah, I can't meet that need.
yeah. I can't meet that need. I can hear that, and then I've seen him also just sitting there and pretending to be upset. And you're like, oh, that's just kind of him wondering if we're paying attention. And then there's another version of him where he just goes, ah, and he's just learning to yell in a way. And you're like, oh, you're just experimenting.
Yeah, you're
That's so
exploring.
cool. Yeah, so I'm interpreting the meaning and relevance of all these sounds, and it's kind of fun to try to read him and be attuned to him.
Yeah. And I think there's lots of ways that shows up throughout the entire parenting experience. And quite frankly, as we pay attention to that, I think it shows up in kind of every relational experience that we have.
Okay, I got a place I want to take us, so I want to
Okay.
acknowledge, part of my goal with this podcast is to explore leadership, which we're doing a good job of exploring adventure. What does it mean to create adventure for our kids and adventure with them, and to raise legends? So I'd asked you in getting signed up for a good time together, what does it mean to be a legendary father? And you had written, being an example of kindness, grit, love, and support when our children need it, not just when we feel like it's convenient. And I'm just thinking of like these attributes of kindness, grit, love, and support. Those seem pretty solid foundational things in raising legends. And I'm just wondering, as younger dads, the generation of dads that I'm kind of on the journey with, where it's so fun to have so many dads ahead of me, by the way, that you have a 20-year-old son. It's like, great, I get to lean on you in a way. And I'm just thinking, if all the dads that are kind of in my generation of fatherhood, which could be a 20-something-year-old person who's got a brand new kid, and what you've seen about the way that leadership shows up in our world today. Okay. And I just want to acknowledge those attributes: kindness, grit, love, and support, instilling those into the future generation of leaders today. What you see with the world today, what are your qualms with how leadership shows up in the world today as like a, zoom out as a parent and a leadership practitioner, and zoom out and be more of an anthropologist for me for a minute and be like, I think here's some of the ailments in our culture, in our society, that are getting in the way, that great leadership needs to step up and address, or that, and my ultimate question, I'm going to read it, make sure, like, how do we raise today children who are up and coming? How do we raise them so that one day we have a country of legends, true leaders in this country, stewarding us towards a really great future, versus what feels like a little bit of a questionable environment right now.
Yeah, so that's, man, there's a lot there to unpack. That's a really good question, and we could probably spend hours on that. And I'd love to have that conversation more fully with you at some point. But I think every generation has looked at the generation coming up, and said, wow, like, what a mess. I think the generation I hear in the workplace a lot, like the millennials, they're lazy, they're not hard workers, they're entitled. And yet my experience out there is that that's not necessarily the case. They're lazy and entitled based off of the preconceived notions we have about what's important and what we think they should think is important. And I believe that, if you really look at it, they've done some amazing things. And my experience with them has not been what I think is traditionally ascribed to them. And if I look back again from generation to generation, it seems like, my parents' generation said that about us, and their parents' generation said that about them. And there's no perfect generation. And I think that's the grit piece, is what are we willing, how are we teaching people to stick with something meaningful? One of the things that I'm really concerned about is people's ability to stay focused on something, and this kind of idea that there should be immediate gratification, and that if I don't get it, I mean, I've worked with app developers who literally will go through testing, and if someone taps on the screen and it doesn't immediately, they know that somebody's going to download the next app and use theirs because it operates better. And it might not be a better app, it might not provide better content, but people don't have the patience for that sort of stuff. And I think we've done that to ourselves. And it's fascinating to me as I talk to my kids, they're in a place where they're heading off into the work world, and they're realizing that people don't even know how to pick up a phone and have a conversation. If someone were to call and they were in a customer service job, they don't really know how to talk to people. And it scares them. They're intimidated by it. They don't do that. That's not their social interactions. They'll all sit in a room and be on their phone, chatting back and forth to the person that's literally sitting 2 feet away from them. And one of the things that they've articulated, and that their generation, as I talk to their friends, they've said is, we wish we didn't have smartphones. We wish we weren't always connected. We wish we could go back to having built relationship skills that are new and different. And we want that for our kids. And so I think, and then in the business world, to come back to that piece of the question, I think far too often we create an environment where we expect that growth is the only, like, upward trajectory growth is the only thing that matters. In what other facets of our life, if we think about development and growth, would we ever say that you have to be 100% of the time on this trajectory? Right? There has to be some dips. There has to be some places where we know it's going to be a bad year. We know that statistically that's got to happen. And or we're growing so fast that we're losing sight of other things that matter to us. And we're fundamentally changing who we are at our core. We're becoming less kind. We're becoming less tolerant. We're becoming less understanding, which creates a work environment that adds more stress. And it causes people to disconnect. And quite frankly, I think it's, as we look at what millennials are saying, and people coming into the workforce today, they're saying that's not necessarily the stuff we want. That might not be what we want our business experience to be. And if that's all that matters to you, this might not be a right fit. And I think we're seeing younger workers articulate that in a new and different way. But I think the generation coming up, what I hope my kids, what I hope your kids will start to do and realize is that relationships matter. Those skills matter. Communication matters. Those are not things that are going to go away. Being able to tell a story matters. And life doesn't happen in 30-second sound bites or 300 words or less. It happens in the nitty gritty, trying to figure it out and trying to understand and spend time going, I'm not sure I get what you're saying. Can you tell me again? Because I want to, but help me understand. And the grittiness of, and so when I say grit, I mean both ways, the ability to stay with things for a period of time, but also the willingness to stay with the grittiness of life, even though it's not always perfect. And that
Mhm.
and that there's growth in there, there's development in there, and that's how sustainable success, in my opinion anyway, starts to come to fruition. We have to be more tolerant and understanding of what growth and development really means, and it's not just always we got to be 6% better than we were last year.
I wonder if we replaced, well, yeah, replacing growth with something else, a different notion. And because growth, I'm just thinking of business as a system. If you're constantly like in a vehicle is a system, it's a machine, just like a business, you're pinning the accelerator to the floor. Eventually that system, that machine, that car explodes. Like it
Yeah,
just, so you've exceeded its capacity. So I almost feel like instead of growth, we should be expanding capacity.
love that.
And it's like, can I equip my kiddos or can I equip my team to do more? Not with less, but sometimes there is less. Can I can I equip them to do more, be more resourceful, persevere more, create more? So I feel like it's maybe capacity should be a focal point versus in growth. And through capacity is growth, but it is the wrong thing. There's a certain point where and by the way, a vehicle shouldn't always be on. You turn it off. It's a tool. So as business, should it should a business, an organization be something that you turn off and on, so to speak. You kind of like you use it for a certain outcome and then you let it rest. And then you go for that outcome again and then you let it rest. Right? I don't know. But capacity strikes me as perhaps a different way to
Yeah.
approach it.
Yeah, I like that perspective. And again, if we bring it back to the idea of parenting and parent-child relationships, dad-son, dad-daughter relationships, if we don't create those moments of rest, what kind of relationships do we have? We just create a perfectionistic, I always have to be achieving mindset, which creates animosity between parents and kids, and or it wears people out to the point that they can't even stay connected in the way
Mm,
that we talked about as meaningful.
wow.
And I love your example of the car because I do believe our world is a system. I do believe that organizations are systems,
Yes.
and that there are individual components within each of those systems that matter. And sometimes we underestimate the power of the component,
Mm,
right? The ball bearing inside of something is every bit as important as the bigger component, because if that ball bearing goes out, the whole thing's gone too. And if we don't realize and recognize that we have to create those moments of rest, I don't think we ever have the ability to stop and take stock of where we really are, pivot and adjust, and go after what's meaningful. We lose sight of what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it sometimes.
yeah. So play with me on this. Imagine, you know, me and I know you're still kind of stewarding your kiddos, even though they're a little bit, arm's length away now, but your intention is still there. You have the shared intention as me, perhaps, for those young parents right now. It's like if I want to equip and empower my kids to have, for instance, what was it, kindness, grit, to feel love and support. But then we added in, I want to teach them patience. I want to teach them communication skills. I want to teach them relationship skills. what are the other key attributes that I feel like, or that you feel like are absolutely necessary to instill so that the future we collectively are, say, bulletproof and and have great capacity?
Yeah. Um, Again, I wish I had the right answer for that question because I think it's a really good one. I don't know that I have the right answer. I have a perspective.
Yeah.
I think that I think we have to have an external view of being willing to understand what's important to others. And that doesn't mean that we have to conform with that point of view. It means we have to be willing to listen to it. It means we have to be willing to dialogue about it, and we have to be willing to let others have their experience, and it's as valuable as our experience. I think there's this piece of are we willing to be vulnerable and show vulnerability? Are we willing to learn from our kids and acknowledge from them when we have those moments of, wow, you just did something that I'd never thought of, or that was so much better than I would have done it. Um, and that's a moment of stepping back from a role of leadership or a role of being the parent and stepping into I'm teaching them and letting them learn that they have a voice
Mm.
and that they have ideas and they have the ability to teach me and I have the ability to learn from them, which I think is a powerful life skill and relationship skill. And I think it far too often we get stuck. Our world operates in a lot of hierarchies. And I mean, even the parenting structure can sometimes feel that way. But I think it's far more back and forth, give and take than we anticipate or give meaning to in the way that we should. And if we could do that, I think a lot, and we could help our kids figure out how to do that. I think it would change a lot of life experience in the way that we
Well,
experience it these days.
the hierarchy you speak of is part is either the system or within the system. It's a system within the system. So perhaps it's our duty to reveal the system that we're all in, which it sounds like we're a part of the matrix and we might be. But what I'm, you know, it's like reveal the system, the cultural system we operate in and the economic and political. It's like reveal it and then teach them to navigate it. And also, and part of doing that is to show them that you are adaptable in the system itself. Yeah.
And then even inside of that system, you have some autonomy. You have the ability to shape and create and make it what you want to make it. And that's powerful, and that everybody can do that in ways that can be for the greater good.
You just told me this beautiful anecdote about your son and a lesson you took from him in the face of some adversity he's coming to as a result of perhaps the ripple effect from COVID.
Yeah.
So, of course, I'm sorry to hear your son has this ailment, but in a way, holy smokes, how beautiful is it that that it provided this lesson to him, by the way, and then that you had the first, you're like the front row witness of this revelation. So walk us through that. I know you already told me a bit, but walk us through that situation.
Yeah. So when he was 17, he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Just wasn't feeling well. And we were in the middle of moving. And he went to move a box when we landed in our new location. And he moved one box and was like, Dad, I'm so tired. I can't even function. And he'd been telling us for a while he hadn't been feeling great and been drinking a lot of water. And he's an active kid. He's a soccer player. And we got him in. It turns out like his blood sugar was 800, supposed to be 150, and or even less. And they sent us right to Children's Hospital. They're like, he's type 1 diabetic. He's really sick. Like we got to get him in. And that just became this journey of a lot of his dreams and things that he thought he was going to do and that he was being recruited to do to play university soccer started to unravel before him. And he started to say, well, okay, like I can't change that, but what can I learn from it? And he went through the whole, all the stages of grief, the anger, the frustration, the sadness, the depression, and cycled back around through it. But where he's ultimately landed is I still have a lot to give. I still have a lot to learn. I can still stay involved with something that I love. And it was about a week ago, we were standing in a store at a counter, and we were just talking about things, and he was talking about how he wants to just make sure that he goes after his life and lives every moment in a way that's meaningful, because he's pretty sure that if he looks at the statistics for a type 1 diabetic, they're about their life ends about a decade sooner than the average person. And so he's kind of come to terms with that reality. And now it's forced him to say, what do I want? What do I want to create? What do I want this to be? And it was a really profound moment for me to stand there and listen to that. And he was talking about it nonchalantly. I was on the verge of tears because I hadn't really connected it in that way. Maybe
Wow.
I was living in my own denial around it, but it made me realize that he's turned this into something that it doesn't have to define him, but it can really shape how he lives his life moving forward. And it can shape it in ways that he didn't anticipate, and that neither did we. And that was a beautiful learning moment for me. Again, where kind of the child or the student became the teacher. And it was a powerful reminder of how amazing our kids really are.
It's amazing that factor, the way he's actually approaching it with some grit, by the way, with some patience, with some, you know, uh, it's somehow amplifying him,
Yeah.
believe it or not.
So,
It could hinder us. Things like shit like that could hinder us.
yeah.
But it turns out his his vantage on it allows it to amplify him. That juxtaposition for the change in his vantage on it is actually turning him on, lighting him up. I'm
In
pumped
ways
for that. And
that
I
yeah.
just wonder, and I'm being sensitive of our time frame in the conversation here, so this isn't necessarily a question, but an acknowledgement. Like, what specifically did you and your wife do over the years? What opportunities and challenges did you seize in these little micro moments to equip him with that mindset and outlook, so that when he finally does face a pretty daunting version of adversity, he's like, well, what about this way? How might I do it this way?
Yeah,
So
I like
that's off to you.
I will give full credit to my wife on that one. I think one of the things that she's always said, and that's been powerful to her, she's experienced some rough stuff in her life, and she's always said, people ask her the question, well, like, that sounds horrible. You wouldn't wish that on anybody else? And she goes, no, I wouldn't wish it on anybody else, but I wouldn't want anybody to take it away from me either, because
Mm,
who I am today is a direct reflection on those experiences. I don't want to do it again. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But I also realize and recognize that had I not had that, I would not be who I am and see the world the way I see it. And I
mm,
wouldn't want that to be different. And that's a message she's landed and reflected in them. And she's always said, life will be hard. There will be hard moments. There will be amazing moments. There are great people everywhere, and there are not great people everywhere. There are hard things that we go through in every life. I don't care, how much money you have, how much money you don't have. I don't care where you live or where where you wish you lived. Everyone will experience hard times in some way, shape, or form for them. And how you embrace that, how you find a way to weave those moments and navigate through it, um, to help shape you in meaningful ways. Now, it might not be intentional, but if you can take the learnings from that and realize and recognize that there's some value in that you can maximize and learn from, you will be better off. And that was something I learned from her. That was something, again, when you say, did you have that revelation? Did you come to that agreement? It was something that I've heard her say our entire time together. And I've heard her say to our kids multiple times. And I think it was a moment where my son reflected on that and said, I've seen it, I've learned it, I've heard it, and now here's my chance to make it be who I am.
Mm. Yeah, I wonder if he consciously went through it or if he just inherently had it in him and tapped into it subconsciously. So,
Good question. I'll have to ask him that one.
yeah.
Or
Okay,
that's a good dinner conversation right there, dude.
grand finale of what I feel like is part one because I have all these technical. I'm like, I got to tap into your psychology mind, and I'm just thinking about a million questions for new dads that it'd be fun to ponder. So part two, pending. Finale question here. I want you to visualize, like you might even close your eyes and take a few breaths as you ponder this. It's you are, you're an old son of a gun at this point. I hate to say it. Your daughters and your son are in their 60s, maybe their 70s, sitting around a campfire, reflecting on their parents. You're not in the room. You're nowhere to be found. Who knows where you're at? It doesn't matter. And they're sharing with the next generation of Stowells and maybe a subsequent generation of Stowells the three things that you're known for. What do you hope they are as they weave tales about you around a campfire?
Really good question. I I hope that they would say, no matter what, no matter when, no matter where, no matter how, we knew that my we knew that he loved us. We knew that my mom loved us. We knew that my dad loved us. Like that was unwavering. We never questioned that. I hope that they would also say that they were willing to admit when they fell short, and they were willing to apologize to us and say sorry when they hurt us, whether they recognized it or whether it was us helping them recognize it. They were willing to say, you know what, I'm sorry, that's not how I want you to feel. Um, I might have done it for this reason, and I might think it was in your best interest, but I'm glad that you came to me and let's talk about it. I would hope that they would be able to say there was a recognition that we were willing to humble ourselves in those moments. And then the next thing is I would hope that they would say they they helped us realize and recognize that life is big and beautiful and wonderful, even though it can be hard. And we realize and recognize our own capabilities as a result of them believing in us so much.
Mm,
I think if those three things could come out, I'd be pretty content to smile on the way to the grave.
mm,
Uh, but as you're thinking about a part two, I also think it would be really powerful to talk to some of our kids and ask them those questions because we have our perspective as parents. I think that could be a fascinating addition to this piece, at some point.
right.
When you interview your kids someday and say, hey, here's what I wanted to do. What was your experience? Or can you interview my kids and say, hey, here's what your dad said. How much of that was BS? Right. Or how much, what did you really feel and experience? I think it'd be powerful.
Right. Go straight to the source. Remove all this rhetoric. Go straight to the source. Well, Shane, congrats on being in this beautiful cusp of life. Congrats. Good luck with it. I'm excited to know that you're an empty nester as a result of just, you know, a lot of focus and dedication. And I know that's bittersweet for you and your wife, but
It
at the
is.
same time, mad props for all the goodness. Thanks for
Hey,
your time today, and I appreciate you. I'm going to catch you on definitely part two coming up soon. So
sounds
thanks,
good.
Shane.
Thanks, Dave. It's always good to talk to you.
I got you. There you have it. That's been another episode of Whoa Dad, Go Dad. If you like what you're hearing, hit the like button, subscribe to the podcast so you get the future ones, and please spread the word and post this episode to your social networks. That's powerful. Perhaps the best thing you can do is share this directly with a new dad or a soon-to-be dad that you know personally. Let them know you're rooting them on. And indeed, drop a comment and be really a part of this dialogue on fatherhood with me. Let me know in the comments a question you want me to ask other dads, or just some feedback. How does this sound to you? What's helpful? What stands out about these conversations? I would appreciate that intel as I grow Whoa Dad, Go Dad. I've got many more episodes to come, and I'm so glad you're here. Looking forward to catching you on the next one.
Whoa, Dad, go Dad, here we go now. Oh, yeah, the old ultimate role